Okay. Okay. We are, of course, in Duties of the Heart. If you happen to have this edition of Duties of the Heart, we are in volume 1 and page 382, 383. If you do not, if you're going to use the Sefaria, translation is a little bit different than mine, but still, it's pretty close. You'll find that in the chat. There's a link to it in the chat, and we're at section 31. So we're in the third chapter of the Gate on Bitachon, on trust in God, and we're in section 31 there. So we've been talking about why it is we should. First we talked about what it is to trust, and what exactly we trust in other people, right? So how do we know that somebody is trustworthy? And we came up with a whole list of things that make someone trustworthy, right? They have to have our interests at heart. They have to be able to pursue our interests. They have various things that make a person would make a person trustworthy. And then we concluded, right? Then we concluded that really the only being in the universe that actually fits the criterion of absolute trustworthiness is God, right? Because God is, of course, omnipotent, right? Can always take care of our needs, understands our needs from the inside out because knows us from the inside out, etc. So now we come to another question. So if God is so great at taking care of our needs, and if ultimately we're supposed to have trust in God, right? We're supposed to have trust in God, then why should we bother to make an effort? Why should we work? Why do we have to make a living? It doesn't seem to make any sense, right? If we had complete trust, right, and God is going to take care of us, then let God take care of us, and we can sit back and let ourselves be taken care of. So why do we have to make an effort? So now he says, when we contemplate the necessity for man to strive and exert himself in the completion of his affairs, we find this to be obvious. He says, well, first of all, it's obvious that we do have to work, right? That we have to do something. He says, cause. He says, for when a person needs to eat, right, and prepared food is placed before him, if he does not employ the necessary steps to eat it by lifting it up to his mouth and chewing it, says he will never abate his hunger. It's built into the world that there's just no way to do this, right? There's no way that you can be completely passive in the world. It's not possible. So even if you got somebody to provide you with all of your meals, right, and buy all the food for you and cook all the food for you, right, you're still going to have to make an effort. You're still, even if they fed you with a spoon, right? Even if they fed you with a spoon, you're still going to have to chew and swallow your food, right? There's no possibility of making it in this world without having to make some kind of an effort. So it's clear that having to make an effort is built into the world and is really not an option. And the same is true of a thirsty man in need of water. It says, all the more so if one cannot attain food unless he labors to prepare it by grinding, kneading, baking, and so forth. It's actually a very beautiful thought, is that when we eat bread, right? When Jewish people eat bread, we say a special prayer on the bread, and we thank God for being hamotzi lecha min haaretz, for bringing bread from the earth. Now, the weird thing about that is, of course, that bread does not come from the earth, right? In fact, of all foods, right? If I were to say, asparagus from the earth, well, that makes sense because asparagus comes popping right up from the earth, exactly like an asparagus. But bread, of course, that's not true, right? It goes through lots of different processes. You have to You have to plant it, you have to reap it, and you have to winnow it, and you have to crush it, and you have to grind it, you add water, and it has to rise, and all of these things that go into making bread. So how do you say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, that God brings? So we say that while it's true that the bread doesn't grow on trees and it doesn't pop up from the ground, right? All of the processes that go into the making of bread, those are all things which are gifts. Those are all things that are gifts from God, right? All those things are gifts from God. But nevertheless, we still have to do all of those things. So, um, so if your food is not provided for you and if you have to make your own food, obviously that's going to take effort. Still greater, more strenuous effort must be made if one has to buy the food then prepare it. It's even harder if one does not have the money to buy the food, in which case you have to make a greater effort and take steps more drastic than those mentioned above. Either hire himself out for a wage or sell precious objects and belongings and the like, right? You have to do business, or you have to be a wage earner, right? So the world is made in such a way that it's virtually impossible for a person to avoid making effort. So while we believe that God is trustworthy and we should have trust in God, we also have to work for what it is that we earn. So he says the reason the creator, no, now the question is why? Okay, very good. Now you've told me that it's part of the system. This is the way it is, but why is it like that? Right? Seems very strange. On the one hand, we're supposed to trust in God, right? For my Muslim friends, tawakkul, right? It's very important to have tawakkul. It's very important to have bitachon. It's very important to have this trust in God. And then you're telling me, but wait a second, the whole world is built in such a way that we have to labor, right? Rather than just depend on God. So why is this? It says the reason the Creator obliged man to exert himself and search for the means of obtaining a livelihood and other necessities is twofold. So two reasons. One, since the divine wisdom demands the trial of the soul with service of God or rebellion against him, God tries the soul with what will reveal its choice in the matter, namely with the need and want for that which is external to it: food, drink, clothing, shelter, and sexual relations. So the first reason is that we are in this world. We're in this world to experience a moral test. We're here to experience moral testing. And the area in which we are most tested is in those things which are related to our body and our bodily needs and our desires. So all these things, food, drink, clothing, shelter, and sexuality, these are all things where people are likely to be challenged in terms of whether or not they serve God or they rebel against God. So he commanded human beings to seek and obtain these requirements through the available means in specific ways and at certain times. When the Creator decrees a man should attain them, the man realizes and attains through ample means which are provided to him. What the Creator does not decree that he should attain of them, he does not attain, and the means are withheld from him. His surface or sin is demonstrated through his intent and choice, one to the exclusion of the other, and this then determines reward or punishment, even if he does not carry out indeed. So what's your actual results, right? Your actual results, how much of anything that you're going to have in the world is not necessarily determined by you, right? But nevertheless, your response, your moral response, how you go about relating to those things in the world, that's going to be your source of reward and of spiritual reward and punishment. So your consequences, your spiritual reward and consequences are going to come from your intentions in dealing with those things. Are you going to deal with those things? Your with your making a living, with your having relationships, all of those things, are you going to deal with those in a way that conforms with God's will, or are you going to deal with them in a way that doesn't conform with God's will? And so, and not just what you actually do, but also with your intention. So second, if a man did not have to trouble and busy himself in seeking means of obtaining his livelihood, he would rebel and chase after what is forbidden and would pay no attention to what he owes God for his goodness to him, as it says, they have lyre and harp, timbrel and flute and wine at their feasts, and they do not notice God's work. They do not see his handiwork. And another quote, this is a beautiful, it's a great quote from Dvarim. He says, Yeshurun grew fat and kicked. They grew fat and thick and gross. He forsook God who made him. And this is a theme, I would say, throughout it certainly occurs in Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, and then throughout the prophets, that when we are overloaded with physical comfort, we tend to get arrogant, and we tend to get arrogant and neglectful of our Creator. There's a challenge to wealth that most of us are unable to live up to. If we have too much, if we are overloaded, if we never have to work for anything, we become arrogant and we think that this is something that we deserve. And in that arrogance, we can completely forget God. So that's the second reason. So it's out of his mercy. Oh, it just continues, sorry. And he says, so excellent, he quotes from Pirkei Avot, from the teachings of the rabbis of the 1st and 2nd century. Excellent is the study of Torah together with a worldly occupation for labor, and both puts sin out of the mind, and all Torah without work will be in the end neglected and occasion sin. This is a very traditional Jewish attitude that a person who is pursuing a life of Torah, a person who is pursuing a life of spiritual attainment, should also have a job, right? And why is that? It's because it acts as a kind of ballast, right? If you're so involved in spiritual things, you could start to believe your own press, right? And you're going to start to believe that you're some spiritual giant and whatever else. It's good to have a job. And we find that the rabbis of the Talmud had all sorts of jobs. Some of them were farmers. One was a shoemaker. They had all sorts of different occupations. There were, of course, famous rabbis who were vintners. They grew grapes, and there were many rabbis who were doctors, and especially in the Middle Ages in Spain, as doctors, and all sorts of other professions. And it was considered to be very good to have a profession. Now, nowadays, that's a very big political issue. There are some people who say that no, in this generation, it's very good for people to study Torah and study Torah only, and they shouldn't have an occupation, and they should be able to learn Torah all the time and to study all the time. But that's certainly not the viewpoint here. The viewpoint here is that it's important for a person to have work, if only for their spiritual well-being. How much more so is this true for one who has no share in either, who concentrates on neither of these pursuits? So he says, if a person who's learning Torah, right? So a person who's really involved in spiritual pursuits needs to have an occupation in order to balance them out. How much more does a person who's completely immersed in the material world, right? Need to have make some sort of effort, because otherwise they're just going to sit around and live a hedonistic lifestyle. So it's out of his mercy for man that the Creator may be exalted, preoccupies him with the affairs of this world and the hereafter, so that all his life he is absorbed in them and not seek what he does not need and cannot grasp with his intellect. That is the matters of the beginning and the end. So this is a quote. This is a quote from the Talmud. Says that a person has to be careful to avoid meditating overly on the beginning and the end, on what existed before what existed before the creation and what will exist after the creation, right? Because these are things we essentially can't know, right? Even I would say that even if we have hints about these things, right? So even if we have hints, we have prophetic in the prophets, we have hints about what comes before and what comes after. These are not things that we're going to be able to understand, and to become preoccupied with those things is not good. And so to help keep us from becoming preoccupied with metaphysical issues that are always going to be beyond us, and that are going to and that could just kind of lead us into a state of constant confusion, we're at least busy with taking care of life and taking care of ourselves. As the wise one said, he's quoting Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, King Solomon, he has also set the world in their heart. For a man will never fathom the work that God has made from beginning to end, right? So we're not going to know, and it's beautiful. He says, Lo yunsa adam et ha'maseh asher asa Elohim mirosh ad sof. And we're not going to know, that we're not going to understand the creation from beginning to end. We're not going to be able to understand anything. I think this is very liberating, by the way. For me, it's very liberating to know that I don't have to understand everything, right? There are things that I'm not going to understand. And one of the reasons why I have to be involved in the world, I have to be involved in making a living, I have to be involved in, the sometimes ugly and messy business of eating and drinking and living in the world is in order to let me know that I'm not going to be able to figure everything out, and that I have other preoccupations. If, however, a person gives priority to the service of God and resolves to fear him, trusts in him in all his interests, religious and secular, turns away from the despicable things and aspires to good qualities, does not rebel when in comfort, nor inclined toward leisure, is not swayed by his baser instincts, nor seduced by the enchanting things of the world, then he will be relieved of the burden of seeking and searching for a livelihood, since the two reasons for obliging him to do so that have been mentioned, trial and rebellion in the midst of poverty, will have become inapplicable to him. So if a person were to truly, right, if you would come to the point where those would no longer be a problem, right? If you came to a spiritual state in which no matter how much you had or how much you were taken care of, you wouldn't become arrogant, right? You wouldn't become arrogant on one side, and you wouldn't become preoccupied with metaphysical quandaries on the other. It says then God might actually take care of you like that and may free you up and say to you, no, listen, I want you to be engaged in full-time spiritual work because you're able to do that. You're not going to suffer from the difficulties that can come from that. And so he says, God will not let the righteous go hungry. So that person, right? So that person, there are people who are completely taken care of like that. Okay. Who are completely taken care of like that because they don't require the particular tikkun or the repair of making a living. So one might say, we see some righteous individuals who obtain their livelihood only after hard work and toil, while many transgressors are at ease and pass their lives in prosperity and comfort. Very good observation, right? We know that there are people who are they're wonderful people, they're very righteous, they're amazing, and they really struggle They really struggle. They really struggle financially. They struggle just to make even a meager living, right? That happens. And we see sometimes that there are people who are horrible people, right? Who have incredible prosperity. So how do we understand that? So our reply is that the prophets and pietists, so here he calls, he's he says right, he says Nevi'im Chasidim. So again, whenever he says Chasidim, usually he's referring to probably the Sufis of his day. So it's replying that the prophets and the pietists already inquired into this problem, and one of them asks, this is the prophet Yirmiyahu, the prophet Jeremiah, says, "Why does the way of the wicked prosper?" Another says, "Why do you show me wrongdoing? Why do you show me wrongdoing and look upon vice? Violence and oppression are before me. There's strife and contention arises, for the wicked surround the righteous." And it goes on, and it gives more verses. "Why keep silent when the wicked man devours more righteous than he?" And another one said, "Such are the wicked, ever at ease, they increase wealth. In vain I have kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence, for I have been constantly afflicted and I'm chastened every morning." Right? That's from Tehillim, from the Psalms. And another, speaking for his contemporaries, the prophet Malachi, "They have tried God and escaped." And there are many similar passages. This is a fundamental human problem, right? This is not okay. Nathan says he has words from these, that has a song from these words of Jeremiah. Okay, very good. These are fundamental human problems. I mean, there's no way that you can live in the world and not wonder, why is it that good people sometimes suffer so much, and why is it that bad people do so well, right? I mean, the Kardashians. How did that happen? So the prophet refrained, however, from giving an answer to explain the reason for this, because the reason for the trial of each one of the saints, the reason for the prosperity in this world of each of the wicked, differs from that of the other. So we have no idea what every soul needs, right? We have no idea. So when you're looking at a person who's righteous, okay? You know they're righteous, but you don't know anything else about them. You have no idea what the configuration of their soul is and exactly what it is they need in the world. In the same way, when you're looking at somebody who's horrible, right? You see their horribleness, right? But you don't see necessarily anything else about them. You don't know exactly what it is that what their soul needs. And remember that it's not just this world, but the world to come. So there are algorithms at work, so to speak, that we don't understand, and we can't possibly understand because we don't understand what a human being is, and we also don't understand what their outcomes are. I'm reading Leah's comment in the why is doing the right thing such a thankless job? Maybe seeking the approval is the opinion of others is the problem. Well, I think that that's partially true, right? I mean, I think that's partially true, right? The job itself should be its own reward, right? The job itself is its own reward, right? Waiting for, reward it's good luck with it. Okay, so now he says, look, we just can't possibly understand. We didn't answer that because we don't understand. He says the hidden things belong to Hashem, our God, but those that are revealed belong to us and our children. There are things which we understand, right, about the world, and there are things which are hidden from us. And a lot of the ins and outs of what it means to be a human being and the tikkun, the repair of the soul of a human being, are things which are hidden from us. And so we see generally that there are people who are good and there are people who are bad and there are people who are righteous and people who are not righteous, but we're not seeing completely their inner we're not seeing their inner workings, right? We're not seeing their inner workings, and we also don't know all the possible outcomes. Roxanne is going to have to explain to me later what Buckley's mixture is, because I'm not sure I know what that is. Tastes wretched, and you have to explain that to me. You have to explain it to me. Okay. Buckley, as in William F. Buckley, that Buckley. Okay. So he says, okay, so he continues, says, so these are hidden from us. If you see oppression of the poor, denial of justice, right in a country, do not wonder at his will. That's from Kohelet, from the book of Ecclesiastes. And as scripture says, the rock, his deeds are perfect, for all his ways are just, right? It's very, very, he says everything, God is perfect, and everything he does is perfect, right? So we shouldn't be looking at, I see, it's a bad cough syrup. I understand, right? So everything is, we have no idea, and we have to say, if this is the way God wants it, then he understands, he knows better, he knows why it is that the Kardashians are living well, and he knows why it is that some great saint is living in poverty. Nevertheless, I think it proper to suggest a few explanations of this matter will at least to some extent be satisfactory. I suggest the following reasons why the opportunity to obtain his livelihood without trouble and trial might be withheld from a righteous man. So he's actually going to try to make an attempt at it. And to explain to us, at least give us a sense of why it might be that a righteous person may not be able to make their living. So it may be of the consequence of a previously committed sin, for which he is now paying the penalty. As it says, even the righteous get their deserts on earth, right? So it could be that this person who's righteous is not as righteous as you think, right? That they've made some kind of an error in the past, and this has to be repaired. It's required. They require a certain amount of suffering in this world in order to clean themselves up. It's a kapara, I guess Arabic kafara, right? It's an atonement for them. So that's one possibility. Sometimes it's accordance with the principle of compensation in the world to come. As it's written, do you want your good do you want to do you good at your latter end? Meaning that you get, sometimes it's in order for you to get your reward in the other world and not in this world. So sometimes it seems as if God holds back the reward in this world so that we can get a bigger reward in the next world. If we get it in this world, then we get less in the world, to come. So maybe something is being taken away from us in this world in order for us to get a bigger reward in the world to come. Sometimes it's to demonstrate his patience and positive outlook in the service of the Creator, right? It's in order for you to show other people, and I think that's a beautiful idea, in order for you for the righteous person to demonstrate how to deal with the problems of the world. I saw yesterday a video of a woman whose son had just passed, who had just been killed. And she expressed so much faith. And I thought to myself, like, why, of all people, why would this woman's son be killed? Person who has so much faith and seems like such a righteous person. Well, how horrible. And yet I'm watching and she's teaching me, like, I'm learning from her in that moment, like how one would deal with a situation like that. A beautiful, faithful way of understanding that situation and speaking to that situation. So he's saying here that maybe that's why it happens to the righteous people, so that they can show the rest of us, right? Show the rest of us how to deal with the trials of life. They need to experience them and show the rest of the world how to deal with those things. So okay. Okay, sometimes wealth is placed in his charge like a deposit until God may be exalted and gives him Wait, hold on. Yes, okay, so he continues. And he says this is yes, demonstrate patience and positive outlook in the service of the Creator may be exalted, so that other people might learn from him. And we see this in the case of Job, or Ayub. At times, it is because of the wickedness of a good man's contemporaries that the Creator may be exalted, tries the good man with poverty, want, and sickness in order to exhibit his piety and devotion in the service of God in contrast to their conduct. You know, sometimes when you see good people who are in conflict with bad people, right? It's in order for you to be able to see good and evil, to be able to understand good versus bad, to have a clear picture. Sometimes we're given that kind of picture of black and white in order for us to be able to understand the world better. At times it's because of the wickedness of a good man's contemporary, that's what I said, in order to exhibit his piety and devotion in the service of God in contrast to their context. But it was our sickness that he bore, our pain that he suffered. The Christians have a very different understanding of that verse, but I won't get into that. Sometimes it is because of his failures to demonstrate zeal for God's cause and exact punishment from his contemporaries, as you know from the account of Eli and his sons, of whom Scripture says, and everyone who is left in your house will come to bow low to him for a bit of money and a loaf of bread. It's sometimes sometimes people suffer because they failed in some they failed in some particular they failed in some particular area, and that caused them to suffer in a particular area. So as to God's favor bestowed on a wicked man, this sometimes happens on account of a previous good deeds for which God rewards him in this world. So it may be that when you see the wicked person, you don't know exactly, um, you don't know exactly, you don't know their entire history. You don't know that they haven't done something good in their life. Of course they have. I've yet to meet anybody yet who is so completely evil that they've never done anything good in their life. Um, Not saying such a person couldn't exist, but I doubt it. Um, so the person has, who knows what good thing they have done. Maybe they're getting the reward for that good thing. So he says he repays his enemies to their face to destroy them. Now, he says sometimes the person, right, is getting the, again, just like we said before, that it's possible for us to get a reward, to not get a reward in this world in order to get a reward in the world to come. It's also possible to get reward in this world in order to avoid getting a reward in the world to come. So if a person was on the whole pretty rotten, right, but nevertheless had done something good, instead of giving the reward for that thing in the world to come, right, where it's a spiritual reward, they would get a physical reward in this world. So sometimes, and he says, continues, he says, sometimes wealth is placed in his charge like a deposit until God may be exalted, gives him a righteous son who is worthy of it. As it says, he prepares it for the righteous man will wear it. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and amassing to hand over one who is good before God. So maybe it's that a person is amassing, let's say a person who's not so great is amassing wealth, but that wealth is going to go to his children, or to his children's children, who are going to be very virtuous. And so this is all part of God's plan. Part of God's plan is that he should be able to amass this wealth, but not for himself, but for his or her descendants who are going to deserve it more than he does. So his wealth may also prove to be the primary cause of his death or undoing. As it says, there is an evil affliction that I have observed under the sun, wealth reserved for its owner for his misfortune. And this certainly, all we have to do is look in any tabloid. We can see this happening. We can see this happening all the time. People who have incredible, people who have incredible wealth. I mean, we could just go down the list. And who, because of that wealth, because of that wealth, were allowed to, bring themselves down and down and down and really make the ultimate fall. And so that wealth became the instrument, of their undoing. Unfortunately, it also becomes the instrument of, their ability to do harm to others. That's the sad part about this, right? Those people rarely just, bring about their own ruin, but they also ruin a lot of other people in the process, which I don't understand, and he did not address here. It may be that the Creator may be exalted, patiently bears with him until he repents and becomes worthy of his good fortune, as it was in the case with Menashe. So some people, and God knows that they have potential, right? God knows they have potential and that they eventually may repent. And so he causes them to prosper and to build themselves up in the hope and the expectation that they're going to repent, they're going to change themselves, and they're going to use their resources for good things. Sometimes it's on account of the past piety of his father, in return to which it is proper to bestow benefits on the son, as it was said to Yehu, the son of Nimshi. These are referring to ancient Jewish kings. As it says, he who walks in integrity is a saint, blessed are his children after him. I have been young and now I'm old. I have never seen righteous man forsaken or his children begging bread. We actually say that verse very often at the end of our prayer after eating. And the idea is that sometimes we get benefits not for ourselves, but because of our ancestors, because our ancestors did something good, and as a reward to our ancestors, we receive good. Sometimes it's in order to try those who are deceptive and inwardly evil, but when they observe the prosperity of the wicked, hurry to turn away from the service of God and hasten to win the favor of the wicked and to learn from their actions. This is a very interesting one. It's also a trial for people who are outwardly righteous, who are being outwardly righteous, and they're doing the things that they're supposed to do. And then they go look and they see somebody who's a louse and who's doing well, and they think, well, why am I doing all this stuff? Like, why am I sitting here being virtuous when that guy is doing so well? And I'm just going to go do like him. So it offers another dimension of free choice and test, right? For us to see that the people who are not righteous are doing well, and that maybe we're going to go run after them. We're going to do the same thing. So to the man who is pure towards God is identified, and the man loyal to his service is recognized, right? The person who says, yes, it's like Buckley's mixture. It tastes wretched, but it works, right? Right? It's a thankless job. Maybe, the world is not saying, the world's not cheering me on, right? Nobody's giving me awards, right? And I don't have the big house. I don't have the swimming pool and everything else. But nevertheless, I don't want their life. I want my life. Excuse me. So to the man who is pure towards God is identified, the man loyal to his service, recognized through his forbearance at a time when the wicked rule over him and humiliate him, right? Because not only that, right? Not only that, they may have power over you, right? And so they're busy making fun of you, right? They're making fun of you. Why don't you have your, have you seen my gold Bentley? I put my gold Bentley outside your house. You're a big schlepper doing nothing, learning Torah and making a little living for yourself. And I have a gold Bentley. So you're humiliated. For this, he will receive reward from the Creator. May he be exalted. As you know from the account of Eliyahu and Izebel is Jezebel, and the account of Yirmiyahu and the kings of his time, right? So even though they tried to humiliate the prophets, right? The prophets who wore rags and, lived in caves. Even they tried to humiliate them, make them feel bad. They were not buying it. So also we shouldn't be ashamed to live simply. Um, and so we'll continue next week talking a little bit more about now that we've demonstrated that a person has to make a living, right? We'll now explain why not every person has to make a living. So why you don't have to do all of these things. So we'll talk about that next time. So thoughts, what do we think?
I just wanted to say the thing about like when you're too comfortable or when you have too much or something that it can
Yeah.
distort you or something. It's funny because someone was asking me the other day, oh, so can we agree that you have a really clever way of putting it, good times make weak men or something? And
Yeah.
like we've been having this conversation with the person, and like, yeah, like it sort of does. And it's kind of like we go to the gym for people who do that, and you go on all those machines and stuff. Well, like the whole point of that is like to get stronger by like engaging something that resists you, right? Like that's a force against you so that you can be stronger. And I think I've said this before, this class, that everything in the world is like a way to understand God or how to get to God, like the seed breaking open, or like, going to the gym to get stronger, and you need to like, have pain, and it doesn't feel comfortable, and like, you have to like know how where your limit is and stuff, and after it hurts, but then each time you do it you get stronger over the long term. So, and then the other thing was, like, we have this weird thing where we think that we're like Lego people, where like our head and our rest of our body is detached. Like we need to move around to know things, like to just sit, here and read a book, as opposed to like going and cleaning your house and thinking about some stuff. Like I think like we are wired so that like we do need to do a job. We do need to have like a physical purpose. We need to have chores. We need to have structure. We need to go out into the world and things like that, because that's part of the knowing of it. Because your body also has to do a thing, not just your head. So anyway, that's like things that.
Even though I do fantasize about being being a disembodied head, but yes, yeah, but that's for later. Alia?
I've quite a few thoughts actually. So when we were talking about the intrinsic value of work, it reminded me immediately of Khalil Gibran. So I'm just going to share that because chat, because it's one of my favorite poems. So just the idea that work has an intrinsic value for your soul, I thought that was really interesting. And a lot, I really like what Roxana was saying about the gym, because it's my favorite saying, and I say it really flippantly a lot, but you don't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Like, it's hard, change is hard, but when you've gone through that change, you appreciate it, because things are, when they're really hard, then you see the growth and the development. And I think that's what Roxana was saying, and I really appreciated what you said there, because sometimes we don't see the benefit until after the fact. We've gone through something that's really hard, and then when we reflect, it's like, actually I needed that, and God knew that I needed that to grow. So and the other thing I just wanted to add was that, at the beginning you're talking about sort of resistance, I think, and Roxana was talking about resistance, and then you're also talking about a lot about bread, and it reminded me a lot of sort of the first day after the last day of Ramadan, it's Eid, and you're having coffee, and it reminded me of that same feeling of like, this is the first day that you can have your morning coffee again. So like Ramadan is creating that artificial resistance in order for you to deal with it spiritually, and then you go through a kind of hardship, you create that hardship artificially if you don't have that in your life. So I thought that was all really interesting. But yeah, those are my
that resistance is very powerful. I loved, by the way, the machines. I had never thought about the machines as being kind of like, you have to fight against them, right? That's kind of like.
I want to also add something I just thought of that I've thought of before. A really great also metaphor for this is to think of the heart cycle. So like, the filling and the emptying, and you need to have like a certain amount of both. And if you have too much of one or too much of the other, then like you'll have like regurgitation or you'll have whatever, right? Like, so like just that's always really like a great way. And we're always saying like protect your heart and there's neurons in your heart. So like, all this kind of stuff. Like just like I think the heart is like really important spiritually because of those things. So that is
Welcome to my world. I have a leaky, I have a aortic valve insufficiency. So my heart is overflowing all the time. So I have a problem of overflowing heart. So Nathan, did you have a thought?
Yeah, it's a thought that I wonder if perhaps Bachia was making an Arabic pun by connecting Yehu ben Nimshi to then a verse about walking, because I know from my few years of Arabic that I try to use to supplement my Torah learning that Nimshi means let us walk.
Oh, like him, she, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, he has those two verses next to each other. I wonder if that was his kavana, his intent.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, I guess I would be surprised if it weren't, because I mean, if you can make a pun, you should always make a pun. Oh, thank you. What Aliyah posted a poem in the thing, so make sure to click on that so you can give it a read. And Khalil Gibran is an amazing poet. One of the like, I don't know what they're like. He's like one of a small group of expat Arabic poets who I guess you actually live in the United States. And if you come to Washington D.C., I'll take you to the Khalil Gibran Memorial. We actually have there's actually a Khalil Gibran Memorial on Wisconsin Avenue. So right by all of the embassies. So it's quite beautiful.
What chapter was that we were looking at? I didn't catch the chapter or whatever section of Sefaria. Thing.
That was we started on 31.
Okay.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. I can put it again in the chat. It's Faria and in section 31. That's where we started. Okay. And yeah, thank you, sir, very much for the poem. I'm really looking forward to like sitting and basking in it. I love Khalil Gibran. It's one of my favorite things. So, okay. I wish everybody a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful week, and should have only peace. And thank you for being here and being part of the solution, not part of the problem. And I'll Bezrat Hashem see some of you on Monday, and hopefully others of you next Wednesday. And if anybody needs to get me, you know where to find me. Comments, anything you need, just come find me. Okay? Well, bye guys.
See you later.